Alrighty, man. We did it. Here we are.
We're here.
It's really funny because normally, we know each other, so we'll reintroduce ourselves to each other. I guess because this is our first podcast called So. So my name is Johnny Lobos.
And I'm Shane Pereira.
And, we're good mates that met under some really unique circumstances.
Yeah.
And so I believe the aim of this first episode of Serve is for us to introduce ourselves, our journey, our spiritual journeys, how we became friends, and how we decided to do a podcast to share our experiences with, our Christian beliefs and what that's done for us in our life, especially, I guess you'd say, in the last 2 to 3 years of us experiencing some, pretty traumatic and difficult moments and regaining our faith and belief in God. Anything you want to add to that?
Totally agree, man. And I think that when we sat down and discussed this podcast and talked about different topics that we may talk about, one thing that really stuck out with us was that we need to start by talking about our journeys, because I think our own individual spiritual journeys kind of align for us to meet in a really kind of cool way. And the thing is, we sit at the cafes or we sit at jiu-jitsu and we always talk about this. So we talk about this every week, but it's almost like I love talking about this topic because it just reminds me of my purpose and reminds you of your purpose every time we talk about it, which is really cool. And it's a really beautiful thing when you start surrounding yourself with men that almost, I guess, uplift you, right? And when we look at our friendship circle, man, you and me, our producer Adam and stuff as well, all the boys at JIT, we just continually uplift each other, and it's a beautiful thing. And it only made sense that we were going to be here doing this podcast now from our journey. So I think it'd be really cool, instead of us just sitting here and talking smack, it'd be really cool to start with our journeys, because it'll give the listeners the why about why we're doing this. Do you know what I mean? Just by talking about our journeys. So did you want to go first? Or?
Yeah, well, I think even as before we get into that, I think we need to give a big thank you, obviously, like you mentioned, to our producer Adam, who's helping us so much do this. So Ads, I don't want to look at you while you're filming.
We're going to break the fourth wall. Big shout out to Ads.
Thanks, Ads.
Love you, bro.
So massive thank you to Adam. Did you want to also thank our sponsors?
Thank our sponsors? Yeah.
No, we don't have any sponsors.
We're going to thank
Sebastian and German.
Yeah, Seb, German, and David as well for allowing us this beautiful space, the new warehouse. They haven't even used this warehouse yet. We baptized it for them.
So massive thank you to the OPG group for allowing us to use this warehouse, for filming our very first podcast. And so
I think as well, before you go on, Johnny, one big thank you that we have to give is right before we started this podcast, before the cameras went on, Johnny and I just said a prayer together as well. So we just want to thank our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because we went through very similar paths, and we went through so many ups and downs, and we have so many messed up stories that we could be talking for ages about, and we probably will end up talking about that because we're open books here. This is what it's about. We're not holding back. But we just want to thank the Lord Jesus Christ for giving us this platform and to be able to connect with so many people, because I think that's a gift that we have, is that we do draw a lot of people into our lives, especially with our line of work. We'll go into it more later on, but we own our own business. I own Soulflex Personal Training. Johnny and Tim own Wolf Life. And we've noticed that we do kind of, attract a lot of people into our lives. And with that comes a big responsibility as well. So that's what this is about. Yeah,
I love that, man. And it's so true. So, all right, so we'll kick it off, man. Do you want me to go first?
Please.
So where do I begin? I think for me, my spiritual awakening, it started roughly around 2 years ago, and I had known you or known of you, but our paths had never crossed. And so I own a jiu-jitsu academy called Wolf Life Academy, and you have a cousin who trains there called Jonas, and you used to come with Jonas occasionally on Sundays to train at our open mats, but I wouldn't really train on Sunday, so we would never cross paths.
But I
would always see your content online. And I wasn't even really following you at the time, so I guess I was just like spying on you and just like being a mad stalker. But I really liked
Right, my man bun.
I gotta get my man bun. The man bun challenge. And so for me, it was like I was really admiring the content that you're putting out, like the spiritual content. I'm like, man, this guy's saying some really amazing stuff. And I just thought, that was like really unique and special. And so that was like in the background. And then something pretty traumatic happened in my wife's life. And I saw the profound effects it had on her. And honestly, from night and day, I almost felt like my own life had kind of collapsed. And what I mean by that was seeing my wife suffer and cry so much, it brought out this anxiety episode in me that I hadn't experienced in like 10 years. And it hit me really hard. And so before in the past, I'd experienced like pretty bad obsessive compulsive disorder, pretty bad anxiety. And I'd felt, I'd kind of overcome that and beaten that. And then I saw my wife struggle so much and cry so much. And then out of nowhere, I had this thought pop up in my head. And it was like, what if you end up one day hurting your wife? What if you end up hurting your family by any means and you lose it all? And that put me in a really severe like anxiety spiral. And then out of nowhere, I felt like this monster of OCD had just come back. And like, honestly, like night and day, it almost felt like, it felt like I'd lost my life. And so unless you've ever really experienced like severe anxiety or even depression, it's really hard to explain what that feels like. And so I started going through this phase where I just felt like I'd lost everything, even though I hadn't lost everything. But the fear of loss was driving all these obsessions. And the thing with OCD and anxiety is that the more that you try to get rid of it, the more that it persists. So the more that you try to get rid of the intrusive thoughts, the intrusive feelings, both internal and external, the worse it becomes, the more that this kind of like monster starts to grip at you. And so I felt completely helpless. I felt completely lost because I used to parade and carry myself and be like, I'm the wolf. Like it was this persona like that, I'm the wolf. I'm building a fucking empire. I'm building this, I'm building that. Nothing can hurt me, nothing can harm me. And then when I saw this one thing affect me so much, and I saw how much that was driven by ego, it really, really hurt. And so I was just lost, man. I was just absolutely lost and confused. And this stuff happened, it was roughly like around 18 months ago, 15 months ago. And that's when I'm like, you know what, I need to do something about this. And so, and at that same time, I gave you a follow, and then we actually connected through jiu-jitsu.
So we hadn't met yet when you started following me. Yeah, okay.
No, we hadn't met yet personally.
Yeah.
And there was just something really powerful about the way that you were talking about God and spirituality and belief in all these things that I was really like attracted to.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, like this is something that I need to investigate. And so like I was raised Catholic. I'm South American background, proud Chilean. But I was just so lost because I was confused with the idea of, do I only believe in God because I'm South American? Do I only believe in God because I was raised as a Christian? Mm. And that made my anxiety even worse because that made me feel even more helpless, because then it felt like not only now do I feel like I'm going to lose everything in my family, but I don't even know what I believe and why I believe it. And so I started seeing a therapist, and she was really good. She was amazing. But it was getting pretty bad to the point where I'm like, I think I'm going to need like antidepressants. I'm going to have to now start getting SSRIs, because it started affecting everything in my life, man. Like in terms of like, I had no motivation to exercise. I had no motivation to train. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to run my academy. It was just affecting me so much that I'm like, I can't function anymore. And by this point, we had already known each other. And my therapist is like, look, if you decide to take antidepressants, that's a personal choice, but you need to speak to your doctor about getting them prescribed. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to call my doctor. And there was this one doctor that I used to always go to, but because I hadn't seen her in years because of COVID, and I was never sick during COVID, you'd come off the patient list. And at this point, I was rock bottom. And I remember I was driving back from Bowral in my car, and I call up, and they're like, look, you can't see her. You've come off her list. And I'm in tears at this moment. Like, I'm driving and I'm crying and I feel broken and lost. And I'm like, and I don't remember the last time I've actually begged to someone. I don't even know if I've ever begged. But then I'm on this phone to this receptionist that I don't know. And I'm begging her. I'm going, listen, like, you have to listen to me. Like, I need to see her. She's the only person I trust. And she told me, she's like, look, I'm going to put you on hold. Just give me a sec. And when she put me on hold, I started praying. And I hadn't prayed, man, I don't even remember. And that's what I mean. Like, so I had Christian beliefs, but I wasn't a practicing Christian. I was raised Christian, but I wasn't practicing as a Christian. And I remember praying so much. And then she's like, look, she's agreed to see you. And I was so relieved and happy. And that when I went and saw my doctor, I was telling her everything that happened to me. And I said to her, I was with the intention of walking out with antidepressants.
Yeah.
And I spoke to her and I said, listen, I need something because my brain just is fried. I feel fucked. I just don't feel good. And she spoke to me for a while, like 30 minutes about like my general health and everything. And then out of nowhere, she's like, Johnny, do you believe in God? And I just remember that I still remember her asking me that question like that. And it just hit me really hard because I was like, why is my doctor asking me about my spiritual beliefs?
Every time you tell me this, I get goosebumps, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I was like, I think I do. And she's like, do you go to church? And I'm like, no, I don't. And she said, look, she goes, if I give you these antidepressants, she goes, this is it. This is the last kind of bit. And it's going to change your brain. It could change your brain chemistry. There's a lot of things that can go well with it, but a lot of things that can go wrong with it. She's like, but have you given your problems to God? Have you tried praying? Have you actually surrendered yourself? She goes, because there's nothing in this life that God will give you that you can't handle. And I just remember sitting there just honestly saying to myself, what the fuck is happening right now? Like, what is going on? And I took that, for me personally, it's like, just to experience that, I'm like, there's something in this. There's a reason why I've hit this rock bottom. There's a reason why I begged the receptionist. And there's a reason why I felt I had this intuition that I had to see her. And it almost felt like, for me, it felt like divine intervention. I felt like God was talking through my doctor.
It's the Holy Spirit working through.
Yeah, and that was the very first time I'd ever experienced something like that.
Yeah.
And so that really tripped me out a little bit. I'll be honest, it scared me and it comforted me, but it kind of scared me at the same time. And because I got kind of stuck on the idea of well, do I believe in God or not? And because anyone can say, yeah, I believe in God. But I'm like, but what does that actually mean? And so for me, the next part of that was you know what? I need to investigate this. I need to look at this a little bit deeper. And that's where I started speaking to you a lot about all these things and about the Bible. And I'm like, I'm a Christian. I'd say I'm a Christian. I believe in God. But I've never prayed. I would pray, but only when things were wrong. Only when I wanted things. It wasn't an everyday practice.
Yeah.
I'd never read the gospel. I'd never read the New Testament. I'd never done that. And so when I was doing therapy as well, they speak a lot about how your belief systems are made up by your actions. So if you say something, your actions are the things that really tell you whether you believe it or not. You can't say, I love my wife, but then be cheating on her, hitting her, doing all these kinds of things. Or you can't say, I believe in having optimal health, but you're taking drugs, you're drinking alcohol every night, you're out partying, you're eating fast food. Your actions don't align with what you're saying.
You really believe in it.
Yeah, and so that's why when I was thinking, I'm like, okay, well, do I believe in God? What does that even mean? And I know it might sound like a bit dumb or like we're getting stuck on terminology, but I was like really thinking about it. I'm like, what does belief mean? And I'm like, I'm going to have to explore this belief thing. And I'm like, I felt so scared to do it because I'm aware that if I was raised Catholic as a child, then my biases would be held in, a Christian belief. But it's like, I needed to like tear that all apart and investigate for myself. Do I believe in this stuff because I was raised as a child to believe it and it was indoctrinated in me? Or do I now believe in this stuff because God has spoken to me? And that was, I guess that's what's led us to this journey.
Yeah.
But I'll hand it to you, man.
Man, I love that story. Thanks for sharing that, man. It's I've heard you tell me that story as well about the doctor like a few times. The first time you told me, we were sitting in Nando's.
Yeah.
I remember you like, bro, do you want to have lunch? And it was like after like a jiu-jitsu session. I was like, yeah. And like, I thought you were going to talk about how you're going to promote me to like a blue belt and shit. And I was just like sitting there ready. And you told me this story. I'm like, okay, we've got a different way. No, but then I was just like, I remember you telling me that. I was like almost choked on my tenderloin. I was like, this is crazy. Like, because when you were telling me that, man, you could just feel the Holy Spirit just working this magic, man. And it was like, I can guarantee you that doctor probably didn't turn up expecting to have that conversation with you either. I think that was just blurted out. Like, I mean, it was like you said, just divine intervention. And that's the power of the Holy Spirit, I guess. But like, and it's crazy. And like that story as well kind of changed my, I guess, like perception of doctors, because anyone that knows me knows that I have a long beef with the pharmaceutical industry and like modern medicine. I think there's a time and place in modern medicine, and we'll probably get into that in future topics and stuff. Sure. But like, it kind of like made me realize like, man, like I'm such a judgmental person. I'm just got this stigma about doctors and stuff as well. Yeah. But there is some really like beautiful, open-minded kind of people out there. And when I share my story, I had a similar thing with like antidepressants and stuff as well. But I think what really aligned you and I was that we had very similar paths, really similar paths. And it was like the coincidences were quite uncanny and pretty scary as well. And it was, it only made sense while we did connect. And even like you said, like when I was coming to the open mats on Sunday, I'd always hear people talk about Johnny, mention your name, and like, Jonas would mention you, Albert, our mutual friend, would mention you as well. And I was all the way at a different jiu-jitsu academy hearing about this, and I was, I think we met at the right time, even though I was training at your facility. We hadn't met and stuff as well, but I think it was just perfectly brewing for the right time for us to meet, which was around that time that you were experiencing all that as well. Yeah. Similar to you, man, grew up in a Catholic household. My parents were born in Malaysia, which is predominantly a Muslim country, but because of our Indian ancestry as well, we grew up Catholics. And same thing, we'd go to church every Sunday. We had to, my mum used to run like a prayer group as well. So they'd have like a big statue of the Virgin Mary, and we'd go do the rosary at people's houses every week. And to be honest, man, like I always believed in God, always had faith, but man, I'd go to church and I'd be doing the rosary and I'd just be thinking about what I'm gonna have for dinner or something. You know what I mean? Like I didn't understand what it meant to have a relationship with God. I was just there because I had to be there. Yeah. And I feared God because I was told that I had to fear God. Do you know what I mean? And I never second guessed it because I was surrounded by it. My family, my uncles, aunties, cousins, we all just believed in God. So I just didn't think there was another option. But I was always someone who was very, I was always a seeker growing up. Like I'd be looked at as the black sheep because I would always ask questions. And, like growing up, like you're not allowed to question things in religion. You're not allowed to question things in God. I'd be like trying to make sense of everything. Yeah. But I guess my belief in God never wavered, but I just didn't understand what that meant. Like you, didn't understand what that meant to believe in God, or didn't understand religion. And then as I got older, I just didn't go to church as much. Once I was old enough to kind of, I guess, make my own decisions, I would only start going to church on more like special occasions like Easter, Christmas and stuff as well.
Same.
And like you, I'd only pray when like during times of stress. And it's funny now, like with Soulflex, obviously, like I'm doing the meditation and breath work for clients and stuff. And they always ask me like, oh, how often should I meditate? And there's so many correlations with praying and meditating. And even in the Bible, like they refer to praying as meditating.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times as well. And it's funny, like when you mentioned that, how you like, when you said like you'd only pray during times of distress, same thing with meditating. I tell clients, I'm like, you know, don't just meditate whenever you're stressed out. Meditate every day so that 100%. You start approaching the world in a meditative state, right? And it's the same thing with praying as well. But, you know, I would literally only just go to church because my mum wanted me to go to church. So I'd be like, I'd almost make an agreement with her, like I'll go on Easter or Christmas or things like that. And I found like I was such a hypocrite. I'd only just pray when I was like hanging on a thread with something. Yeah. I was like, shit, like, and automatically I'd just go straight to God.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So, yeah, anyway, like it got to the point where I was just, because of my mid-20s, I was with my partner, my ex-partner for, I think, 6 years. And I grew up with a really big family. Like my mum and dad both have 10 brothers and sisters. All my mum's side's in Malaysia, but my dad's side's over here. And we grew up really close. We all lived in the same suburb. You know, my cousins were like my best friends growing up. Anyway, there was 4 of us. My brother, Jonas, who you mentioned, Jonas' sister, and myself. We all grew 1 year apart. And we pretty much did everything together growing up. And then my brother got married, and a year later, Jonas got married. And a year later, my cousin, Belinda, got married. And I was like, and at the time, I feel like, you know, I don't regret any partner I've ever had because they all kind of helped shape who I am, right? And the partner I was with at the time, I really loved her. We had a really great relationship at the time. And I just felt it made sense, like get married and stuff as well. And then I did. And then it got to the point where on paper, it looked like I had the perfect life. You know, like got married, just built this brand new house. Everything was looking really good. And then, but people couldn't see what was happening internally. Yeah. I was going through this internal battle because I just felt lost. I felt so confused. I felt so out of place. And then I started feeling really out of alignment with my family because I was just seeing them just living this life. And I was like, it's working perfectly for them, but it's not working for me. Yeah. It's not making sense. And then, you know, I had this secure job, but that was out of alignment for me. And I just felt completely lost. So I could really empathize with you when you were going through that too. And then it got to the point where I just became really detached from my life and who I was. And I just could feel myself really spiraling because I felt like I was just wearing a mask. Yeah. And I was just doing things to please people. And I could just continually see myself just really losing who I was. And yeah, and the problem with me back then, and it took me a few years after this to kind of realize that, but I was a massive avoidant. I would constantly sweep things under the rug. And like you, like when you're talking about that, how like you just felt like you're the wolf and you're just like, you know, unbreakable. Yeah. I would just like masquerade as this like alpha male and just kind of like, you know, make it look like I was just indestructible, that I had everything going, that I had all the answers. Yeah. But deep down, man, and I didn't even realize it because I started believing my own lies. And there's this Japanese parable, and I really love it. I've got it tattooed on my leg, like through a picture, through an image. But they say everyone has 3 faces or 3 masks. One that the whole world sees, one that your closest friends see, and one that only you see. Yeah. Right? And the thing is, you can like put on a mask and live a lie and trick anyone around you, but there's 2 people that you can't trick, and that's yourself and God. Yeah. Right? And it was that final mask where I knew that something wasn't right. And I knew that I'd been living a life for so long, pretending to be someone I wasn't, that I started to actually forget who I was. I didn't know who I was. And man, it led me to a downward spiral. And I was, you know, it's pretty hard to say it, but I was a very weak person back then. really weak. And, you know, now I would consider myself a strong person, and that's only because of the grace of God, because I have a relationship with God. But back then I didn't have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
You know, I just felt disconnected from religion. I stopped worshiping, you know, like I'd only go to God when I was stressed out.
Yeah.
And I was so weak. The only strength I had was that mask that I was putting on.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm gonna shorten the story a little bit, but I was just downward spiraling, and I felt I was going through this phase of destruction, and it was just so much easier to fall than to climb back out.
Yeah.
So I just turned to drugs, turned to alcohol, ended up like ending my marriage with my ex-partner, and then I just continues downward spiral, and I was just bringing everyone and anything down with me, and the alcohol, the drugs, the partying, the sex, it was all distractions. And I was just doing that because it was so much easier. And it's funny, there was like a Bible reference. I actually wrote it down because I'm not going to lie, I'm going to butcher Bible references. I don't remember anything, man. But it was,
so don't worry.
It was a really strong one. And it was John 3:18 to 21. And it talks about why people turn to darkness and why people turn to evil, right? And it was saying that God's light shines everything. It shines your insecurities, it shines your weaknesses, it shines your fears, right? A lot of people turn to the darkness because they can hide in the shadows.
Yeah.
They turn away from God because it's easy to hide in the darkness. That way you can sin and you're not worried about who's looking at you because you're in the shadows. And for that period of my life, I was in the shadows, living in the darkness. It was easy to turn to sin. I was justifying my mistakes as well.
Yeah.
To make myself feel better for doing them. And I was always been a really intuitive person. Like I was saying, I was always kind of like seeking the truth, always trying to kind of like, I was always marching to the beat of my own drum. And there was something inside me saying, you need to be alone. You need to be alone. So that was part of why, like, also, like, I left, like, my relationship. I refused to be in another relationship. And then I decided to go live by myself. And I was living in the city by myself. But even though I was living by myself, I was still never alone. I was constantly out drinking. I had people over. I was going on dates. And I would never be alone. And then after a year of living by myself, I was like, I remember talking to my intuition, which is God's voice to me, saying, like, what is this? I was living alone. And he's like, no, but you're not alone. You're living alone, but you're never alone. And that's when I realized, like, I need to be alone in my thoughts. And then I made a commitment. This was back in like 2020. So like 4 years ago, I made a commitment just to really spend time by myself. And then as soon as I did that, I realized why I've been avoiding it so long, because it's really fucking confronting.
Yeah.
And it's really humbling, because then you realize, like, man, you've been a really selfish prick. You've been really, like, you've been a narcissist. You've been so ego-driven. And, you know, like, I grew up and had a really bad relationship with my dad. A lot of things that he did growing up that we probably will unpack later on in future episodes and stuff as well, but a lot of stuff that I didn't really agree with him. And from a young age, like, my mum would tell me stories to the point where I was in nappies. I just would just not want to be in the same room as him, right? And it did kind of bring out a lot of trauma in me in the future years. And but when I had that, we call it shadow work, right, in the spiritual world. When you do that shadow work, and I took that time to be by myself and unpack all that trauma, really kind of dissect myself, I realized, wow, all the things that I really hated about my dad growing up, I have those same qualities.
Yeah.
And that was really confronting to admit, right? We just projected it in different ways.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why it was hard to see. But I was like, wow, I'm been really materialistic, really ego-driven, really self-centered. You know, I would like hide behind lies and deceit and just justify my own actions. And it's, I haven't spoken about this in a while, actually. I used to talk about it a lot, but like, it's actually quite hard to talk about, but it's fact. And but it's almost like you needed to kind of like strip those layers away so that you could kind of, as the Bible says, become born again. You know what I mean? And it's weird because I never say that I returned to God, because I feel like I never left him, but I understood how to have a relationship with him after that.
Yeah.
But before understanding how to have that relationship with God, I had to understand how to have that relationship with myself.
Yeah.
And, you know, it led me through a whole big spiritual awakening where I was like, you know, started looking at things like things that were frowned upon in the Christian world, like a lot of like energy healing stuff, like Reiki, astrology, even crystals and stuff as well. And that's where I felt really conflicted, because I was I didn't want to turn away from God, but these things made sense to me at the time.
Yeah.
At the time, they really made sense to me. And I think that there's another Bible reference that I won't read out, and maybe I'll put in the show notes later on as well, all the references, but it talks about how God knows your path before you even step foot on this planet. He knows this path and he's got it all outlined for you. And then I started to understand he knew that I would turn away. He knew that I would distance myself from him. He knew that I would dabble with all these more esoteric kind of spiritual practices. But the whole time he knew that I would come back full circle through those experiences with a whole new understanding and a whole new lens with the way that I saw Christianity. Do you know what I mean? Like I wasn't seeing it in this like real authoritative kind of like preachy kind of like black and white way. I came back to God with a more spiritual lens, a more open-ended, kind of open-minded lens.
Yeah.
And I always tell my coaching clients too, I say, your spiritual path is completely personal to you. You could have like an identical twin brother and they'll have different fingerprints, right? You can look exactly the same, but your spiritual path is like your soul's fingerprints.
Yeah.
And no one can tell you what's right or what's wrong. No one can tell you that you're doing it wrong, you're living your life wrong, because you have to fuck up, you have to make mistakes, you have to sin. Like we're expected to do all those things, but then it's what we do from them and how we come back to God. And he then brings you back to him with all these tools and this whole new lens with the way that you see the world, the way that you see yourself, and the way that you see him. And that whole experience kind of led me to, I guess, starting Soulflex and then building this community with you, doing this podcast. So
I love that.
There's no such thing as regrets, you know, like there's no such thing as mistakes.
Yeah.
It's only a mistake if you don't learn from them. And that's the way I kind of see life too. So yeah.
I love that, man. Like I'd probably touch on two things, man, I remember growing up as a kid, even as an adult, I was so fearful. Like if it would rain a lot, I'd be with my cousin Victor and I'd be like freaking out, be like, oh, is it going to flood then? Like, are we going to die? Like, is something bad going to happen to us? Or like, if I was playing rugby league as a kid, I remember once I was like maybe in year 4. So I was like, 9, 10 years old. I remember I cut my leg, but I didn't know what I cut my leg on. And I was panicking. And I'm like, fuck, like, what if I get AIDS from this? And like, I was freaking out for like 2 years. I was going to bed every night as a 10-year-old freaking out that because I've cut my leg on something and I don't know what it was, I'm like, maybe I've got AIDS now. And so I learned as a young kid, like, man, I've got a very anxious mind.
Yeah.
I've got a very creative mind, and it's like a superpower, but just like a superpower, it can turn into a supervillain. And I was so insecure. I was never good with girls growing up. I wanted to be, and I just wasn't. And I was just not happy with the person that I was. And that continued growing as I got older. Even while I was a personal trainer at Fit HQ, I started to get some momentum and some success with like some classes I was running called Wolf 60 and some transformation challenges. And then the era of social media came up. And just like how you mentioned the masks, I picked up this wolf mask. And like I put it on, but it's almost like I never took it off.
Good.
And I honestly adopted the mindset of like, I'm going to build a fucking empire. I'm going to have it all. And if you have it and I want it, I'm going to take it. And I just wanted to be like the best thing. And I'd always be like, I'm working as hard as I can, building this empire for my family. And the whole time, man, I was just lying to myself. I was purely doing that for myself, for my insecurities, for my own like ego.
Yeah.
And when that penny drops and you realize, man, I'm painting this persona, I'm wearing this mask that I'm this strong, unbreakable, undefeatable character, that I'm doing all these amazing things, and fuck the haters. If they want to come at me, I'll take them down too. And then you get home and you have to take that mask off, and then sometimes you can't take it off anymore.
Yeah.
And then I felt like that mask started cracking. And then the one that appeared was the one that I can't hide anymore, the one that's in the light the whole time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so where did my confidence go? Like, I couldn't even trust myself anymore. I wasn't even confident in myself anymore. I was just like so lost and so confused. I'm like, man, I'm just like so full of shit right now.
Yeah.
That this is crazy, that I'm just lying to myself so that I don't collapse because of my insecurities, because of my low self-esteem. And yeah, man, like rebuilding that up the last 2 years, has been really hard. Like, it's been a lot of work, but I'm so thankful to God that he gave me that opportunity to, like, I don't know, stop lying to myself, to stop lying to the world, and just to come out of the shadows and really be who I am.
Yeah.
And something that you like touched on as well was when you said you felt conflicted. Man, like, a year ago I felt so conflicted with religion, with the Bible, with God, because I'd been doing therapy. I started doing online therapy with this coach called Mark Freeman, and he probably wrote the best, in my opinion, the best mental health fitness book there is, called The Mind Workout. And that's where I started making as well a lot of tremendous progress. So I started praying a lot. I started reading the gospel a lot. I started trying to build a relationship with God, but I started, really getting into this whole acceptance and commitment therapy, so ACT. And I just started feeling conflicted. I'm like, because the way that I used to see things, was that if you had a problem, you have to pray it away. It's okay, it's in God's hands, just pray it away, it'll be fine. But then I'm like, yeah, but this stuff's telling me that if I want to get better, I need to do all this work, I need to do all these changes. And then I had this old school of thinking, it's like, yeah, but God will just make it go away. You just got to pray and it'll go away. And then I experienced that, like that you can't be a Christian and believe in meditation. You can't be a Christian and believe in Eastern teachings of like the Buddha and Buddhism. You can't be a Christian and be into crystals. You can't be a Christian and be into breath work. You can't be a Christian and be into science and things like cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. But that's when I reflected and be like, yeah, but who says that? Who says that I can't meditate every morning and pray? Who says that I can't believe in God and believe that Jesus existed and he died for my sins? And be a big advocate and believer in therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized I'm like, a lot of, old school mindsets and mentalities have really been, I guess, morphing my beliefs and like almost like putting this distortion, like this filter over it and just distorting reality. And that's where I'm like, no, man, like, and I think you said it to me, like, we each build our own unique and personal relationships with God. And there's no reason why I can't believe in God, but also believe in science and also believe in therapy and believe in meditation.
Yeah.
And because I feel like God has given us the tools through a body to do the most amazing things. And so it's almost like I always think that pray to God like it all depends on him, but work like it all depends on you.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been doing. And I felt that when I combined both those things, and my wife, massive shout out to Rose, she really helped me with that. Like, so she's a biologist, she's currently finishing her master's in occupational therapy. And she told me that when she started doing her scientific, like her science degree, her biology degree, she actually started to believe in God more. And something that I always was so attracted to her, like attracted by her, was just how objective she can be, just like how honest she can be, and how she's not swayed or influenced by external voices. Because I would have arguments with her, be like, no, you can't say you're spiritual and not read the Bible. Or like, no, you can't say you're spiritual and not pray. And I'm like, man, I'm just doing what a lot of these old school, I guess, preachers would do, or the things that would confuse me. And she's like, well, why can't I do that? Who says I can't do that? And that really influenced me as well to change my approach as well. So yeah, it's funny, man. Like, I think you really, I think summarize that so well about the masks that we wear, the things that we want to show people, our friends, and by ourselves, and also the conflict that we get hit with. That's super important. And it's such a personal and individual like journey. And it's a really beautiful journey. Because I feel in my beliefs is that God has led me to things like therapy. He led me to people like my coach. Because so much of it, I remember my coach would always say to me, you need to surrender. You need to walk off the battlefield. Like, there is no fight. And I kept hearing this word, surrender, 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 surrender. And then I'm like, well, that's what I'm kind of trying to do now, like with scripture. It's like surrendering this idea that you are in control. There are things that we can control. I can control whether I do this podcast, whether I drink this water, little things. But really, are we in control of anything in our lives? And that's why I gave up the idea of like, I need to surrender the idea that, I don't know, that I'm really in control of the big things, that, you know, there is a plan, there is a purpose for me, and I need to accept that and allow that.
Yeah.
And
acceptance and surrendering goes hand in hand, right?
And that's what acceptance and commitment therapy. I'm like, I wonder why I like this stuff so much. And then I just started seeing so much things from like the Bible in things like therapy.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was really beautiful. And then I would even like read stuff like, you know, from Buddhism. And I'm like, man, you see that so much, the direct correlation then to the behavioral sciences now. And even things from Stoicism and Taoism. And that's how we started talking about this podcast, actually, if we're going to segue about how these old scriptures just have such a profound effect in dealing with things that we're currently experiencing in this really, I guess you'd say, strange world.
Yeah.
There's so many beautiful things about this world, but there are so many weird things. And I think that's what we wanted to do with this podcast, was that you posted it up the other day, actually, on Instagram, about how we're not trying to be a church service. We're not trying to be, hey, you don't believe in God? Well, then you're going to hell and fuck you, and you don't know what you're talking about. You're a sinner. We don't want to be like these self-righteous kinds of people that are just being incredibly judgmental towards others.
How critical would that be when you and I would making our mistakes? You know what I mean? Like stuff like.
And that's what
to be, and
that's what I mean. Like, and even like when I talk to people who don't believe in God, and it's funny, like you'll come across like different types of people who don't believe in God, but they're cool about it.
Yeah.
And then you'll speak to people who don't believe in God, but who aren't cool about it, who will attack your beliefs about it, or will try to make you feel dumb about it. But I'm like, yeah, but if I come back at you with your same energy, what's the point? Yeah. If I come back at you like those preachers that you see on YouTube or Instagram, like, what's the point? Like, that's not loving, that's not caring. And so something that I really found in my own journey, and you influenced me with this a lot, was the way that you carry yourself, the way that you behave. That is, I think, one of the best forms of ways to influence someone. Because I would love it if someone would be like, and a lot of actually my jiu-jitsu students have recently come up and told me, they're like, man, you're so much more loving now. You're so much more caring. Like, you're so much more engaged. And I feel like that's because that's like the real version of myself now coming through, rather than the persona I was trying to create.
Yeah.
And so I'd much rather influence people through positive actions, rather than berating them with the Bible and going, hey man, see this line, this is you. So, hey, if you don't fix these things up, you're going straight to hell. Like, I don't want to be one of those Christians. I don't want to be those kinds of people, because again, everyone is unique and different. Everyone has their own unique journey and path. And like you said it, who are we to be hypocrites?
Yeah.
Like Jesus mentions in the Bible, like the Pharisees, who get up on the mountain, to pray in front of everyone. So everyone sees that they're praying, that they're self-righteous. And that's not what it's about, I think, for me or for you, and like what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Talks about those three masks, right? Like deep down, and God knows why you are, like, I guess, praying on that mountaintop, or why you are fasting. It's like, you can lie to the world, but you can't lie to yourself, and you can't lie to God.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's cool. There's a few. I should be writing down stuff like you, because I keep forgetting it. But like, there's some really cool points that you made. Like, I'm gonna go back to when you even said about like surrendering, right? Growing up, when you hear the word surrender, what do you normally think as kids? When someone surrenders,
It's like they've lost a battle.
they're weak.
Yes,
Right?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I saw it.
Yeah. But
It's like, if I surrender, I'm giving up.
Yeah, but it's the actual opposite. Only the strongest people can surrender. Like, you need to have some serious fucking strength and faith to be able to be like, I just surrender, and I'm just literally going with the flow of life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That takes some real mental toughness.
Yep.
And faith to be able to do that.
Dude, especially for someone like me that is so anxious, like uncertainty is like my kryptonite.
Yeah.
And so then I would try to control that, or try to find something to cope with that uncertainty, or I'll try to do something to check for that uncertainty.
Yeah.
And like, for me to just be like, hey, you need to leave it in God's hands.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, like, what you're asking me to do? It's like, I now need to go against everything I've ever done in my life, because I've tried to control every aspect
Yeah.
of things that create any form of uncertainty.
Yeah. It's like what you said the other day, like a few weeks ago, actually. The only certainty in life is uncertainty, really, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like,
pretty cool. I love when you said that, because I've been recycling that like crazy.
it's not mine. I don't know where I got it from, but it's true.
Just claim it. It's all right. We'll get
But
sued.
But it's just like, yeah, man, like, and because like recently, like I had some health scares, but I realized as well at the same time, like I started going into some like past behaviors, because I'm trying to control the certainty. I'm trying to control the outcome. And that's why it's like, the reason why I love the Bible so much, especially like the Gospels, the teachings of Jesus, and say acceptance and commitment therapy, it's because for me, it's about values. Like when I read the Bible and I read about Jesus, like I'm really interested in his values, in his teachings, in his parables, his stories. And the reason why I love acceptance and commitment therapy is because it's all about, you need to accept what is happening in your life. Like, you are where you are. And then you need to look at your values, because your compass is all broken. So then you need to allow your values to dictate your path.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if I value my spirituality, I value love, I value kindness, and I value courage and strength. What does that look like in actions? And that's then just allowing things to be. And that's just something that I'm learning now.
Yeah.
By no means do I have this down pat, and, I still experience like some pretty tough things.
Yeah.
But it's far, far better than it ever was.
Yeah. And yeah, when you talk about like your morals and your values, like aligning with your actions, that was a big, you just reminded me, that was a big thing about what pulled me away from the Catholic Church. As I was getting into my late teens and stuff, I would see a lot of people going to church and, every Sunday in their finest suit, rocking up there, praying, and then doing some really fucked up stuff afterwards, you know what I mean? Like throughout the week. And then for me, it didn't make sense. And like, that's why I stopped going. And looking back now, I can say that shouldn't have stopped me from going, because I just needed to kind of stay in my lane and focus on me. But for a long time, that's what deterred me. And again, like, my higher self knows a lot more than what my human self knows.
Yeah.
And I think that deep down, I really hand to heart know that I was meant to be pulled away for a bit to come back. But at the time, that's why I stopped going. And like we talked about, like, like when I was going through that phase of like that spiritual awakening, when we talked about what you mentioned about, like, like it using crystals and astrology and stuff and all those kind of things, like would conflict it. And it was almost creating a barrier for me to come back to God, because it really felt aligned. But then, even the Old Testament, I was seeing how like David he wouldn't be worshiping the moon, but they'd be celebrating the new moon. and things like that as well. And even now I have to keep checking myself, and I'll talk to God, and I'll be like, because with Soulflex, like it's a lot of like, there is a lot of like esoteric practice in there. Like, you know, we look at with a lot of my clients about manifesting, like obviously like the breath work, you know, my studio's decked out with the crystals, constantly saging, all that kind of stuff too. And I'll usually do the breath work sessions at the beach every full moon. And I remember one time I was laying in bed and I was asking God, and I said, I go, am I crossing a line? Like, if I am, please take it all away from me. Like, take this all away. And I'm happy to start from scratch, or whatever I do that does anger you or crosses the line, I want it to flop. I want it to just not work.
Yeah.
So that's your way of telling me that this is out of alignment with my values, because I guess in the last year, I've just openly made a commitment that I want my number one relationship in my life to be Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like, more than my relationship with like my partner Lorna, more than my friends, more than my family, that relationship's number one to me. And even more than Soulflex, for a long time, my identity was linked to my business.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, like I spent a long time learning how to be that lone wolf. And, you know, it was just me and my dog Luna. That was it.
Yeah.
And then when I had this business, that was like my whole identity was kind of thrown into there. And it was during the time of like the, I think it was the second lockdown. And I think like when everyone was like told that they had to get jabbed or lose their job. And I was just like, well, fuck it, I'll lose my job. And I left teaching. And I felt like on top of the world because I felt indestructible.
Yeah.
I felt like nothing could break me, right? But then it was almost like a massive lesson was being learned right here, because like I was not giving any credit to God. I felt like I was indestructible. I felt like I was in complete control, but really he has way more control over my life than I could ever have.
Yeah.
And by leaving that teaching, like kind of like paths opened up where I started this business, and it just happened also organically. Like I remember one of my friends from high school, Sam, asked me what I'm going to do now that I left teaching. And I was like, well, I don't know. I've just got this long service leave. I'm just using the money and just trying to figure it out. Like, you know, like I'm really into like my health and fitness, kind of want to train. And then I ended up going to her place and training her and a friend. And then people saw that through social media, and it just organically grew into what it was. But again, it was like, there was no reference to God in that at all. There's no acknowledgement to God, no thanks to God. And then like, you know, and I might go into detail about this in a future episode, but like, obviously I got into that big car accident.
Yeah.
And long story short, I'll go into detail later on, but my car collided with a kid, a teenager on his bicycle. And I remember like I got put in a holding cell that day, had to get the drug test, alcohol test, all that. And when I was in that holding cell, and I remember I was on my way to jiu-jitsu, not at Wolf Life, at Gracie, where I used to train. And it was just a Tuesday morning. Like I'd take that same road every Tuesday. In my mind, I was just going to go train, come back, get on with my day. You would not expect this to happen. And the thing, when I was in that holding cell, the thing that really kind of stuck out to me was, one, like obviously I was so freaking scared. It was the most traumatic experience I've ever experienced in my life, because, you know, I don't know if this boy was alive or dead. I was rattling through my brain, like, you know, what could I have done differently? Like, you know, like, should I have like not gone and trained that day? What could I have done? I'm like, no, then I realized I was being stupid. Like, all that was out of my control. I was just doing my normal Tuesday routine. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't on drugs. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't on the phone. And the police had all checked that stuff. So I literally could not have done anything differently. And then I remember just sitting there in the holding cell, and I was freezing and I was shivering. Then I realized that I wasn't actually shivering because I was cold. I started hyperventilating, and I could feel like a panic attack coming. And for me, I've suffered from depression, but I don't really suffer anxiety. But it was the first time I felt like a panic attack like that. And automatically my brain went straight to God.
Yeah.
I just started praying. And it's like what we talked about, like, you know, only praying through times of distress. And I just started praying. And I was just saying the Hail Marys over and over again until I felt my body start to calm down. And then I just my intuition was telling me that all that I had left was just to talk to God and listen. And I remember saying to God, I'm like, God, like, just one, protect this boy. I don't know what's happening to him, but please make him survive. And also two, just help me get through this, whatever your will allow it to be, but just give me faith and courage through this. Yeah. That's all I said. I didn't want to change any outcome. I couldn't change anything that happened. I couldn't control anything that was going to happen, but all I asked him was for courage. And, like, he got me through that, and he got me through the next 2 years when I was going through courts and like all the court hearings and all that kind of stuff as well. And I never once asked him or prayed for a certain outcome. I never said, like, as I was going through the court, I'm like, please find me not guilty, because I knew, no, God, I didn't do anything wrong. I just said, give me courage and wisdom through this. That was it.
Yeah.
And he did. And like, regardless of the outcome or what had happened to me or the boy that was involved in the accident, the whole time, I think a lot of people thought I was sweeping under the rug because I was so calm and stoic throughout that whole process. But it was the power of God and just his faith and courage and wisdom through it. And I'd never been more intuitive and connected to God in my whole life.
Yeah. And
looking back, like, it was really traumatic, but the one positive that I could take from that car accident was that it brought me closer to God.
Yeah.
And we'll do an episode about that in the future and stuff, because there's so many other things that were linked up about that, synchronicities and stuff that happened. But from that day on, I just started looking at my business as Soulflex. I said, God, this is your business now. I work for you. And that's the way I approach it. And I think we talked about it because, like, I used to talk to clients and refer to the universe.
Yeah, we've spoken about this a lot.
I think we should touch on this too. Like, and even in an Instagram post, Facebook post, it'd be like, oh, the universe this, the universe that. And I remember sitting down and having coffee with you, and I'm like, fuck that.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm talking to a client who doesn't believe in God, that's fair enough, because our business is open. We're so open-minded, and it's about community and connection,
100%.
Right? But then if I'm talking to someone who doesn't necessarily believe in God or has a different faith, I will then maybe talk about the universe or stuff as well. But whenever I talk about my own journey, I'm never using the word universe. I'm always going to talk about God, because he's the one that's got me here. And from that day on, I just, even through my Instagram posts and when I talk to clients about my journey, I'll always say God.
I was the same, man. I was like, always, I never gave thanks to God for anything.
Yeah.
I would always be like, I did this.
Yeah.
I built this.
Yeah.
It was me, my hard work, my blood, my sweat, my tears. Especially during COVID, because, we're fighting so hard to keep our business alive. And it was just like, it's all me, it's all me, it's all me, it's all me. And then I would always, post things like, about the universe. I wanted to say God, but I was always just scared and worried about, what are people going to think about me if they know that I believe in God? And I realized, I'm like, dude, I'm just like turning my back on my beliefs. I'm behaving like a coward. And I feel like when my life came crashing down and I got hit with this really hard anxiety spell, as painful as it is and as it was, and it can still be at times, I'm so thankful it happened, because it brought me closer to God. It really made me realize the big and important things. Like, it really put things in perspective for me. And I was saying to you, I'm like, I'm never going to now shy away from thanking God for things. Like, I recently got promoted to like my brown belt.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
And the very first thing I said was like, I want to give thanks to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And before in the past, I would have been really scared and worried to say that. But now I just don't care. It's not that I don't care what people think, but I need to be true to myself. I don't want to wear that mask anymore where I'm just bullshitting myself. And so for me, it's like, it's a big thing not to deny my beliefs anymore, now I'm like, if something good happens, like, I'm always like, glory to God, like, thank you, my Lord.
It was crazy. I got my blue belt the same day you got the brown belt, right?
Yeah.
And I was more emotional about you getting your brown belt than me getting promoted, because of the way that you started that.
Yeah.
'Cause the first thing that you said when you got up there was acknowledging Jesus Christ. And the reason why, like, I was like so happy when I got promoted to my blue, but then when you got your brown, I can see how jiu-jitsu is such a spiritual journey for you.
Yeah.
And it was a really big part of your spiritual journey. It wasn't a big part of my spiritual journey. I could see so many correlations with spirituality and the world through jiu-jitsu. But for you, there was so much attached to that.
Yeah.
And it was just really emotional to see that. Like,
It's just because, man, like, if I should have brought it, I'll bring it one day. I'll show everyone my purple belt. But my purple belt almost went white.
yeah.
And I was only on it for like 2 years.
I've seen your purple. I've been choked with it many times, bro.
But it was just like, man, like, I felt like I honestly sweated out like pain and trauma. And it was just so important to me to give thank you to God, because I was just so happy to be alive, man.
Yeah.
I was just so happy to be on a path where, like, for me, like, it's so important, like my belief in God, my relationship with God is so important, but it's so important as well, like, my relationship with my family. So, like, say my relationship with my wife and my children. And, like, yeah, it's going to get hard now. I feel like if I didn't go through the traumas, the problems I experienced, it would just be a matter of time until I lost everything. Because I was on this path of I was just like worshiping myself, man.
Yeah.
And nothing more. And I felt like not something, but God from above, just like, okay, we need to correct this before it's too late. And to have that happen, to feel like I lost everything, was actually going, no, you're on the wrong path, man. And we need to get you on the right path again.
Yeah.
And I need to connect you with the right people in your life so that you can be the most loving, compassionate father and husband that you can be. And that I can also then be used as a conduit, as a vessel, for God's works and message. And that's how I feel, but in a unique and creative way that is not like, I guess, in a self-righteous, judgmental way. Because I don't want to be about that. And I know you don't want to be about that. And so, like, I felt like now, man, like, my kids Izzy is 6, turning 7, Conan's turned 4. Like, the relationship I have with my children in the last 2 years has been like the best moments of my life. Although I experienced all that suffering and pain, what I've been able to now do with my children in terms of a father, in terms of trying to be a leader in their life as an influence, they now have a father. He's all about them, chasing their dreams, being loving, compassionate, kind people. Like, Izzy will always ask me, Daddy, who's stronger? Are you or Tio Chan or Tio Tim? Tio means uncle. Like, who's stronger? I'm like, baby, before in the past I would have been like, who do you think? Me, I'm the strongest man in the world. And I'd honestly think I'd believe that. But now I'm like, you know what, baby? It's not about that. We're all strong. That doesn't matter. Those things don't matter.
Yeah.
And just like how I like talk to my children now, like, I'm again, like, I got raised in a South American family, man, like old school ways. Like, man, you misbehaved, the shoes came off. And now, like, for me, I sit back and I think about Jesus and I'm like, what would Jesus do? I do ask myself that. I'm like, how would he approach a child having a meltdown in a shopping center, or their child being rude to them? And I'm like, I think he'll do it with compassion and kindness and love. And that's what I do now.
Yeah.
And so I make it all about, like, God. And just like you, like, I think this was at Nando's as well. Like, I was saying to you, man, I feel like the story, I think it's of the Apostle Peter, Simon, which is like, you're going to turn your back on me 3 times.
Yeah,
and he's like, there was no way I'll turn my back on you. And he does it.
I was about to bring this up. Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, that's what I was doing with my life, because my actions were never aligning with me saying, I believe in God. And it's weird now thinking about where I'm at in my life. And I would have never thought, if someone said to me during COVID, hey man, you're going to cut this bullshit out where you keep calling yourself the wolf. You're going to cut this bullshit out where you're going to keep saying that I'm the best, that I'm the man, that I'm building an empire. You're going to cut all this stuff out. And you're just going to be the most loving, compassionate, caring version of yourself. And if someone was to do something bad to you, you'll turn your cheek and give them the other one. I would never believe that. Or that you're going to start like a podcast with a guy called Shane talking about scripture and God and religion and how these things relate to modern times. I would have never believed it. And so it's very interesting and funny, like how the world works, how it all works. But I'm incredibly thankful for that. And so like, I guess if I was like, just to close this point off, if there's anyone out there that is experiencing really difficult, traumatic moments, I would say to them that just focus on the next one thing ahead of you. That's it. Not the next day, not the next hour, but what is the next thing that you could do that aligns with your values? And if you were in the past like a believer of God, just reconnect, not to be praying to God to get rid of your problems, because otherwise then it's just a one-way street. It's like, no, pray to God to have a relationship with God. Do that daily. Build a relationship. Read the Gospels. See the beauty in that. And just see where your life is in 12 months. And that's what really helped me. Like, I feel like that really, really helped me. And I wish I kept a prayer journal. Because I would always see it be like the power of prayer, write a journal, you'll see the amazing things that come out. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so, whatever. But I should have, Matt.
Yeah.
I really, really should have, because I noticed that as I started doing therapy and I started praying, my anxiety was spiking. It was getting worse. But that's because I started to make all these profound changes. I started to relay my foundations in life. And so my brain is screaming at me like, no, not this. You got to feed the other side. And by making these changes, it just brought up all these really uncomfortable internal and external experiences. But that's because when you create a new path, you need to get your hands dirty. And that's what I felt like I've done now, that I've started to create this new path. At times, I definitely sway off the path, but it's so much easier now to be like, what are the things that I'm doing right now that are making me come off this path?
Yeah.
Okay.
Helps you make sense of things, doesn't it?
Yeah, because it's so easy. Like, and I'm sure you've experienced it. Like, how shit do you feel when you spend so much time on social media or just doom scrolling?
Yeah.
Like, you just don't feel good. Like, how shit do you feel when you don't exercise or you don't train? You feel horrible. How shit do you feel if you treat your partner wrong or your family wrong?
Yeah.
Like, you feel it. You're like, you look at these behaviors. You're like, these behaviors are setting me off the path. What behaviors keep me on the path that align with my values?
It's almost like a compass, isn't it? Just
that's how it
constantly just.
Yeah, that's what my coach says, man. It's because I was such a judgmental person, man, like fucking ridiculously judgmental. And then so when my coach was like, my coach Mark would be like, well, look, you need to allow your values to act as your compass. And I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm used to using judgments to make decisions. And then it just started to make sense. I'm like, oh yeah, well, if I value love, I value compassion, I value kindness, what does that look like in actions? And then it made sense. I'm like, oh, I get it now. I get it. And so before in the past, like, if someone like would cut me off in traffic, I would immediately visualize in my head, be like me pulling up next to them, pulling them out of their car, choking them out, doing something stupid. But now when someone cuts in front of me, it's like, I don't have that reaction anymore.
Yeah.
Because I don't judge that person anymore. I might say, oh, well, that wasn't very nice. That wasn't a nice action. But I'm not judging them. I'm not defining their whole identity based off one thing they've done. Where before in the past, someone's like, oh man, can you believe this guy did that? I'm like, man, what a fucking piece of shit. That guy's a bun. And then I find that if you were doing that to others, you're being incredibly judgmental. Imagine then how you are going to be towards yourself in those moments when you're alone. And just like, that's why, like, we live in a world right now with so many distractions with our mobile phones, like with the internet, social media, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. No one now wants to be alone, because when it gets quiet, it's just you and your thoughts and your mind. Yeah. And you're like, fuck, man, I don't want to be in that space.
Yeah.
But becoming comfortable with those things and not judging those things is a skill in itself, but you can only get there when you start to drop the judgment towards others.
Yeah. That's the true meaning of self-love.
Yeah.
The true meaning. And like, you can have as many bubble baths as you want. You can take yourself to City Cave and get a sauna. They're all things that I guess assist you with feeling good. But the true meaning of self-love is that acceptance and forgiveness of your own self, because we're always our own harshest critic. Like, you know what I mean? We're almost so hard on ourselves, but like this world needs more love. Yeah. This world needs more forgiveness. And your capacity to love and forgive others stems from your capacity to love and forgive yourself.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, that's just going to project on other people. And always tell people that's the true meaning of self-love. If you can genuinely love yourself and be so compassionate and forgiving for yourself, because in the end, God put us in this world and He's expecting us to fuck up. He's expecting us to make mistakes. And He doesn't put these obstacles in our way to punish us.
Yeah.
He puts these obstacles in our way to elevate us, to propel us. You know what I mean? So it's when you start viewing all these things with that lens, you start looking at everything with gratitude, not just the good times, but the struggles too, right? And that's something that we can kind of like, we always bond about, is that like we can see the gratitude in all those setbacks that we ever faced. Because even my relationship with my dad, like it's a whole new, we talked about that as well, which we'll probably tap into in future episodes too. But like starting to see that lens of like, I guess my relationship with my dad with that element of forgiveness now, because really like he's played his role perfectly in my life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like he has, because God put me in this world as His son to help me be the person I am today. And it's, and I could only see that once I started exploring that element of forgiveness.
I love that.
Do you know what I mean? I started looking at that relationship with love and compassion and empathy rather than hate and judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, man.
It's a powerful thing.
Anything, man, you want to say to finish it off, I guess, wrap it up? Because I guess for this first episode, it was just a mere introduction about our friendship, who we are, and almost a way, like the ways that we got to, I guess, our spiritual journeys.
No, I guess, I think we just kind of summed it up really well with our stories. That's pretty much explains why we're here, why we're doing this. So it's really cool. And I guess one thing that we want to put out as well that we did mention is that we weren't just putting this podcast out for Christians.
Yeah.
We were putting this podcast out for anyone that is seeking. Yeah. Anyone that is seeking, because like, we don't have the answers.
No, man.
And the thing is, we're going to die not having the answers.
Correct.
Right? And it's, there was a really cool, where is it? Hold on. Yeah, Job 11:7, right? This was Zaphir's response to Job. Can you solve the mysteries of God? Can you discover everything there is to know about the Almighty? And I thought that was really cool, because when I was young, I was trying to figure all this out. I was trying to understand this, right? Yeah. But the thing is, it's so much higher than we are.
Yeah.
It's beyond us, and we don't have to understand it. But having that relationship with Him, it goes off not what the brain thinks, but what the soul feels.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I define my relationship with God. And this podcast is for people that are just seeking anything. And, you told your story to everyone. I told my story. Everyone's going to be their own different path. People that listen to this, they're all going to have their own different paths, their own different, I guess, ideas of what spirituality is. Yeah. And that's what makes life beautiful.
I love that.
That's the beauty of life. And yeah, this is just for anyone that's like us, that are just kind of seeking and discovering, I guess. Yeah.
Man, I love that. And yeah, I'll double down on that. This podcast is for everyone. It is not just for Christians, whether you're atheist, agnostic, Buddhist, Islam, it's like Islamic, Christian, whatever. It's for anyone and everyone, like you just said, like just seeking, wanting to try to make sense of this world a little bit.
Understanding life. Yeah.
Yeah, and like we want to, we're going to cover so many different things, like, extreme toxicity, whether it's male or female. We want to cover things like social media. We want to cover relationships and sex. We want to cover training, health and fitness. We want to cover psychology. We want to cover a wide range of topics. But man, you know what? I'm so thankful to you for us getting together. I'm so thankful to our producer, Adam, who's helping us produce this show. And I hope that it's entertaining for people. And once this first episode goes live and we put it out, we did mention this at the start of the episode. I mean, when we were talking before the episode aired, that, you know, if there are people that want us to pray for them as well, or if they're going through difficult moments, just to, you know, please send us a message, let us know. If you haven't followed us on social media, please give us a follow. But yeah, man, thank you so much, brother.
Cheers, man.
Cheers. Salud.